and welcome to the Moviescramble podcast. You joining us on this thin spring-ish type day. It's a bit early in the morning for me, to be perfectly honest, but that's just the way it is with the scheduling of this particular pod. Today I am joined, as always, by the ever-delightful Mary. Mary, how the hell are you?
I am so glad to be back in my little podcast here chatting with you.
Nice. Well, that's fair. Yeah, that sounds pretty fair, actually. Today we are continuing with our 1995 marathon. We already have an episode out there which covered 12 Monkeys and Strange Days. And for this one, we are focusing on two comedies from 1995. We will be talking about While You Were Sleeping a little later on, but we are going to start off with The American President.
The president has asked me to convey to you that he's sending his energy bill to the floor with a call for a 10% reduction.
The president's expecting our full support.
Yes, he is.
The president's dreaming, AJ. The president
Sydney
has critically misjudged reality. If he honestly thinks that the environmental community is going to whistle a happy tune while rallying support around this pitifully lame mockery of environmental leadership, then your boss is the chief executive of Fantasyland.
Good morning, Mr. President. How are you today?
I couldn't be better. My apologies for the interruption.
Mr. President, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless.
All evidence to the contrary.
This is a film directed by Rob Reiner. It's a 1995 political romantic comedy, according to both IMDb and Wikipedia. It was written by Aaron Sorkin. It stars Michael Douglas, Annette Bening, Martin Sheen, Michael J. Fox, and Richard Dreyfuss, which is a pretty decent lineup, to be perfectly fair. The film is about the titular American president, played by Michael Douglas. He has been in power in the White House for 3 years, and as always with the American political system, they are always just a short time away from another election. So he's going into an election year, and he is trying to get a crime bill passed through Congress, which is going to mark a sort of a high watermark of his first term, and also help him get through the forthcoming election. Now, he was widowed before he came into office, and he is raising an 11-year-old daughter. And basically, he got into office because the opposition, in this case the Republicans, although they're never really mentioned, that basically you can tell it is the Republicans. Yeah. they couldn't carry out any sort of character attack on him because it would have backfired on him, because he was still grieving at the time. So he's going into this new election cycle, and character debate is coming up because the president has met somebody, Sydney Ellen Wade, played by Annette Bening, who comes into his life as a political consultant for an environmental cause. They are wanting to get a green energy bill passed through where there's a reduction in carbon outputs. They want to reduce it by like 20%. So he starts to get romantically involved with her, and that, of course, affects his poll ratings, it affects his personal life, and it gives his opposition a chance to start attacking him. Now, as I say, this is a romantic comedy of all things, based on a story idea from Robert Redford, of all people, who... Yes, he came up with a 3-word sort of tag, which was "The President Elopes," and put it out there for people to do a treatment of that. And the one that came through was the Aaron Sorkin one. So anyway, that's a little background to it. So Mary, a couple of questions. Had you seen this film? What were your expectations and what were your first thoughts?
So I hadn't seen it before, and I didn't even watch a trailer going into it. So my expectations in a way were sort of nothing, because I knew nothing about it, didn't even know who was in it, just started watching it. I'm afraid this film was not for me, because I feel like it didn't know what it wanted to be. On the one hand, it's like West Wing light, because you've got all the bureaucracy and the scheming and the walking through corridors. And on the other hand, you have two leads who, by all accounts, were, sex symbols or whatever back in the day. But I just felt like there was a personality vacuum going on, and I really didn't like the characterization of Sydney at all. I really struggled with it. So I love a mid-90s rom-com. This one just definitely wasn't for me. It felt like weirdly sort of, even like the score reminded me of like the Hall of Presidents in Disneyland in Florida. It felt really schmaltzy, but not in a good way.
That's an interesting point. The music is actually played at Disneyland.
Stop it, is it?
Yes, it is actually played there.
That's real.
Mm-hmm.
All I can think of during it was,
yeah.
It sounds like a Disney ride, and it reminded me of going into the Hall of Presidents in Florida. That is mad that it actually does get played there.
Yep, it gets played there. It was also played as the background music during the televised funeral of Ronald Reagan as well.
Really?
Yep. Which
How bizarre.
I know. It's obviously deemed to be very sort of presidential style music. It's right up there with, is it W.G. Snuffy Walden, who did the music for The West Wing? You can see there's similarities. We will expand on the West Wing thing as well, obviously. I actually like this film. I liked the film at the time. I know it is, well, I thought it was a bit unrealistic at the time when I watched it back in 1995. It seems like a fairy tale now compared to whatever is going on in the world at the moment, because it's the light years away from reality. There's nothing real about it at all. But that didn't really bother me. I still liked it. I kind of like the main central performance of Michael Douglas in it. I can see what you mean about it being like there's a bit of a disconnect. There is a bit of a sort of stiltedness in there between the sort of two leads and everything. But yes, I still thought overall it was a pretty good film, and I obviously enjoyed watching it again, which is a good thing as well. So, like I mentioned with the story, it's about this president trying to do the right thing and basically coming up against a lot of obstacles while basically having his libido aroused a little by the fact that somebody rather glamorous has come into his life in the form of Annette Bening. What did you think of the story? Do you think, well, I can kind of guess what you thought of the story, but what did you think of it?
Do you know what? I'm quite happy to suspend my belief in like sort of political drama, but I think where the story sort of fell down for me is sort of tonally. I didn't know if it was supposed to be this kind of hard-hitting political drama, because you get characters like played by like Michael J. Fox and Wendy Malick and Martin Sheen, who are obviously these sort of hard-hitting political theorists and lobbyists and advisors to the president. And that element of it kind of worked for me, and that was interesting. But the love story element of it, I just found really cringe. Like some of the dialogue I just thought was really, I don't know. And I think because I was trying to place it in my head where this sort of fell historically as well, like with the Clinton scandal, which obviously was like, 98, 99, sort of. So a few years after that. And I just thought, watching it back in 1995, this probably did seem like, oh my God, the president falls in love with a normal woman. But I think now watching it with those sort of historical things in my head, I was like, yeah, this is just making me feel really uncomfortable. And of course, there's hilarious references to the US Army training up the Israelis to go in and deal with their problems, which obviously have not aged well at all. But yeah, for me, the story sort of fell down because I would have preferred if it was just sort of a straight political drama. The love story part of it is where it really kind of falls apart for me, which I get is the whole point of this. So I guess I just didn't get on with that side of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The story initially was more of just a romantic comedy. And like I say, Robert Redford had put that out there in order to get story ideas. He was attached to lead this film when it was just a romantic comedy. But when Rob Reiner came on, they clashed over the story. And Rob Reiner wanted to make it more political, have more political elements to it. And Robert Redford didn't, so he withdrew from the project, still stayed on as a producer, but sort of opened the door for other people to obviously come in and play the part, because they wanted that. Rob Reiner wanted the balance between a sort of political story and romantic comedy, romantic drama. So I can see where you're coming from in terms of like the way that I looked at the relationship between them. It was going to be really awkward because he was somebody who hadn't had a relationship in any way for a number of years since his wife died. It just wasn't on his agenda at all. It was more focused on his political career and everything like that. So the way that he approached it was awkward to begin with, but then he was approaching it from a position of power as the president as well. So some of the language he used and some of the decisions that he made when he was like trying to talk to her and get her to come to the dinner with him and all this sort of stuff was quite awkward. And this is viewing it from sort of today's gaze rather than like back then. But even then, I suppose it was a wee bit sort of not icky, but it was a bit awkward, shall we say, because it wasn't natural. It didn't come across as being natural in any way.
Yeah, because there's a whole scene where they talk about like obviously having sex, and he's like, "But you've never had sex with like the president and all this sort of thing." And I was like, "This is really gross," because presumably he does talk about obviously like he met his wife prior to being elected, and therefore she didn't have the pressures of having to pleasure the leader of the free world. But that's the kind of pressure that he was sort of insinuating that Annette Bening's character had. Now it just made me so uncomfortable. And as I say, I understand that Michael Douglas was quite the pin-up, but for me in this, I was like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable with your characterization. And I think that maybe if this had been treated as a sort of lighter romantic comedy the whole way through, you would have maybe sort of got away with that slightly. But I think because it is sort of grounded in this political reality of he's seeking re-election, you've got, Republicans in high-backed leather chairs plotting with cigars and whiskey. And so there is this kind of serious element to it as well, which is why I think some of his dialogue in particular just doesn't work.
Yeah. So you don't think obviously he was the main focus film, you don't think he sort of carried the film in any way then?
No, don't get me wrong, excellent hair. I knew from the offset that he came on screen that he was a Democrat, because I thought he's got John hair, so historically Democrats always have the better hair, so I knew that he was going to be on that side. But I just found him a bit of a personality vacuum. Like even, they have this first dance together at a fancy state dinner, and he's obviously quite enamored with her, but even that first dance, the way he's holding her is really awkward. It's not like close and sensual, it's like formal. And I understand that that's perhaps because he's the president, but I just never got why they were sort of drawn to each other. So I'd have almost rather have seen more from I would have rather have seen more of Annette Bening, but I'll go on to her characterization later because that also annoyed me. But I like the whole sort of Martin Sheen, Michael J. Fox. I liked Wendy Malick's character as well because she's the sort of hard-nosed kind of lobbyist as well. And I kind of wish we'd seen more of them than, Michael Douglas just doesn't do anything for me in this film at all.
Yeah, I did like his performance in this. He, at that stage of his career, he's maybe about 25 years into his acting career, so he is slightly older. He can take on these sort of roles. He'd come off the back of the likes of like Disclosure the year before. It was these sort of erotic dramas and things like that. So, and he'd been through his well-publicized sex addiction scandal and all that. So this was him trying to sort of focus more on the presentation, the acting, rather than the whole circus that's surrounding. But yeah, so I did like it. I thought he played the part of a widower very well, because he was obviously very attentive towards his daughter and everything, always made time for her, and he was always passionate about things that she should be doing, and the fact that he was involved in her schoolwork and all this sort of stuff. So it was nice in that way, but I can fully understand what you mean about the fact that he was trying to sort of straddle sort of drama and a comedy.
And don't get me wrong, there was moments where it worked, because I loved that scene where he phones the florist and he doesn't know how to phone a florist and he doesn't have a credit card and he doesn't know how to order flowers. And when he says it's obviously like the president of the United States, and the florist is like, haha, and hangs up the phone. Like, I did really like that, because I thought he's obviously trying to make an effort on a human level, but doesn't have the tools necessarily to do that because he's so far up the power ranks, as it were. So I did like that. But I think what I struggled with mostly is the fact that Annette Bening's character, Sydney Wade, is presented as this sort of formidable, sort of hyper-intelligent, like the lobbyist to go to if you want to get shit done. So I expected her to be like, not sort of like shoulder pads and like cigarettes, but just that kind of strong, almost like sort of 80s kind of caricature of what a working woman was like. And the fact that she's just sort of reduced to a sort of giggling schoolgirl in his presence when I didn't see the charisma from him, I think is what I struggled with. I would have rather explored her career and her as a character, but they sort of reduced her to this kind of fling, as it were, with him. And I didn't like that. I guess I'm viewing this, I've obviously come to this film too late. I'm viewing this through a 2025 lens. I'm sure this did really well in 1995, and I'm sure nobody had issues with it back then. But for me, watching it now, I'm like, this is so disappointing that she doesn't get to retain her status as like this really powerful lobbyist. Like, she's just seen as like the love interest. That disappointed me as well, because his power sort of automatically reduces hers.
Yes, it's sort of a standard issue with a lot of films that come from that sort of period, that the female lead is more of a supporting character than a sort of proper co-lead. You don't get an awful lot of that, but there was a number of actors who came through in the 90s, and we're talking about like Julie Roberts, Demi Moore, these sort of actors who could command the similar sort of salaries to their sort of equivalent males. They were getting right up there, but those films and those actors were few and far between.
Yeah,
it was far more sort of lower level actors, the likes of Annette Bening. So many actors there who are all very, very good and all very capable, and they've obviously shown that through the longevity of their careers. But I don't think it was a particularly good time for the parts that were out there. I agree with you actually in terms of the Sidney Ellen Wade character, because she comes in as this initial, we've got to get political strategies in. She's a closer and all this, but then she comes in and it's all kind of, it doesn't really focus on that too much. That whole side of the story is that it doesn't seem to be in any doubt at all. The whole point of it, for anyone who hasn't seen it, is she makes a deal with the president that if she can get so many votes on this environmental bill, then he will get the rest of the votes and obviously take it to the State of the Nation address, where he'll announce that it's actually going to happen. But if he didn't get the votes, then it would be very difficult to get it through at the sort of the levels they wanted to get without it getting watered down or anything. So obviously there's a whole montage sequence of numbers on a wall like a calendar and the number of votes they need to get, and they're pulling them off one at a time and all this. We've got another one and all this sort of stuff. So there is an awful lot of that. So yes, she's not best served in those terms. And the initial scene which you touched on, where they're talking about like having sex, and he says, I'm classed as the leader of the free world, the most powerful man on earth. He says it's just a political thing, it's not, it doesn't actually mean anything. So I like that, because it took some of the tension away from it. But I actually felt that was a wee bit of a cringy scene, that, because she goes away and I'm just going to go and freshen up. She comes back wearing one of his shirts and all that.
I know, it's such a cliche. And this is the thing, like, I would have loved to have seen more of her, like, prowess, like the way they described her. When, as you said, we get a montage, and then for the rest of the film, she's sort of presented as a sort of verbal klutz. Like, she's constantly putting her foot in it with him, like saying the wrong things, hanging up the phone on him. But then on the flip side of that, they go to a state dinner and she whips out some fluent French. So you're like, oh, she clearly is this like really intelligent, well-traveled, sort of well-educated woman. But it's just that she's kind of reduced to this sort of klutzy sort of love interest. Like, I half expected her to be like chewing on a burger at some point, because that was always a thing in the 90s, where you have these like really skinny women like woofing down food going, oh, I'm starving. But I was disappointed that that's kind of what they reduced her to. Because obviously, like, on the poster, they've got like equal billing, they're both on the poster, and it just doesn't materialize that way in the film.
The poster's very nicely backlit and everything with them. It's doing their dance and all that. So it's all very good. So you touched on the supporting cast here, which I mentioned at the start is quite a rich cast. Michael J. Fox in a supporting role, where at the time he was major star. Obviously he was going through, his health issues hadn't become fully apparent at the time, but he had actually been diagnosed with Parkinson's at that point, and he was keeping it quiet. And there's a wee bit about it in sort of the background information for the film, saying he was trying to keep it a secret. he was scared about the medical that he had to go through in order, because they thought they would check his, you know, he would notice he had a tremor and it would affect like his status within the film, or he might even have got asked to leave the film, but it didn't come to that, obviously, and he was obviously there to prepare. But I was initially, when I saw this film, I was quite surprised that he was in what basically amounts to like not even a secondary supporting role, because that would be kind of Martin Sheen and Annette Bening. It was a kind of a level below that again, but I thought he was very good in it. He's almost like the moral compass of the film. He's the one that's putting forward all the ideas and trying to change people's minds and all that. So there was him, and there was AJ, who's the chief of staff, and like I said, there's various other people around him. What do you think? What did you think about the supporting cast?
Oh, it was a really great cast. I mean, as I say, you've got Michael J. Fox, Richard Dreyfuss as well, John Mahoney, Fraser's dad. Also is in it as well as a sort of political advisor, and Wendy Malick, who I've seen in quite a few. She was in Just Shoot Me with Michael J. Fox, actually, which was a TV series that I really liked back in the 90s. Anne Haney as well, who's Mrs. Chappell, who sort of runs the president's kind of desk and phone lines as well. She's sort of kind of well-known sort of character actress as well. So it's one of these sort of, you're doing the Leo DiCaprio meme where somebody comes on screen and you're like, oh, that's so-and-so, and I've watched them in that. So it is a really stacked cast, but as you say, sort of bizarrely, you know, Michael J. Fox, which like a massive name, sort of, you know, mid-90s, and he is this sort of lower down the rung kind of speechwriter for the president. But as you say, he offers a sort of moral compass. You know, he chides the president in sort of one of the first scenes because he's missed out some of the speech that he'd written for him, and it's now created a newspaper headline because he's cut it off at the wrong point, and it's just become a big drama. So yeah, it's one of these films that's sort of full of well-kent faces, as it were, but you're kind of surprised at how little screen time some of them have. I mean, as I say, John Mahoney, we're sort of talking peak Fraser time as well, and he probably has less than 10 minutes screen time total, but he is kind of a presence and a well-known face. So it is an impressively stacked cast, but just don't expect to see a lot of them beyond sort of Michael Douglas, Annette Bening, and Martin Sheen.
Yeah, they are there a lot of the time for expositional reasons. More than anything else, because it's all like adding the dialogue and the keeping things going, basically, more than anything else. I think, yes, it was an impressive cast, and I think a lot of lessons were learned from this film by the screenwriter, certainly Sorkin, who put this film together. The screenplay for this film together. He did the initial draft when it was just The President Elopes, and then he rejigged it so that it became this more, you know, set in the White House and everything. And obviously he's used that again after this. But apparently this took him 3 years to write, and it wasn't due to the complexity of the storyline or anything. It was the fact that he was a massive cocaine addict, and it took him that amount of time because he was just completely out of his face all the time. And that carried forward in his forward in his career. Yeah. It's good to have something to do. He basically just locked himself in a hotel room and walked away and basically got himself fucked up for long periods of time, and then he would come out with stuff. And that isn't anything scandalous or anything. That is fact, unfortunately, because he was eventually fired from the West Wing for that very reason, because he was just not able to meet the demands of network television in terms of producing scripts and story ideas and stuff like that. So, yes, fun and games. So, what did you think of the screenplay? It was quite sharp, I thought. But
yeah, I definitely. I think when you look back at sort of Sorkin's career, you know, A Few Good Men, Malice, which is actually a film that I really like, which isn't highly rated, obviously Social Network, but he's done quite a few sort of these kind of adjacent things, I would call, so like Trial of Chicago 7, Charlie Wilson's War, obviously The West Wing. He's got that kind of in his wheelhouse. This is very much his sort of vibe. I feel like the political elements really worked for me. That was really interesting. I thought the dialogue was really sharp at times. You know, characters are almost sort of talking over each other to get to the point of, you know, a campaign that they're working on or a lobby thing that they're working on. The romantic elements are definitely, again, so storyline wise, this is definitely where it fell down for me. It's like he didn't know how to write two people that wanted to have sex with each other. That's why we had this big discussion about it beforehand. But I do think that, given this is obviously how many years before The West Wing, 4 or 5, you can see you can see there's elements of it there that are really strong. So it's not surprising that he's gone on to work on something that's been so successful, because the political intrigue and, as I say, the walking through corridors classic were some of the strongest parts of the film for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. The political elements of it are very much totally spot on in this film in terms of the way that it's put across. You can imagine, or you can hope that that's how these political decisions are made, because you've got a room full of intelligent people arguing their case but not falling out. There's no massive egos in the room, and the people who are there have answers at their fingertips about all sorts of things, like the state flower of wherever, is, is the dogwood, or that's a tree? No, it's a tree and a flower. No, so they're very, very knowledgeable people. They know what they're talking about, and like I say, it's very sharp, it's very snappy. Apparently, the early drafts of the screenplay were over 350 pages long. Oof. Now, a normal screenplay, it's usually a page a minute that they talk about in terms of from page to screen. So obviously the film got cut down an awful lot in between, which is normal during a sort of writing process. But apparently he recycled an awful lot of stuff that was cut out and actually put it into The West Wing in terms of the walking and talking and some of the story elements and things like that were cut out, especially in the first season of The West Wing. There was a lot of stuff in there that was originally in that film itself. So, and you can see how that was kind of a blueprint for the TV show, because it was focused on, well, the film itself is focused on the president, but initially the TV show was actually focused on the speechwriter. It was a Rob Lowe character. He was going to be the main character, with just the president just sort of coming in now and again. But Martin Sheen was such a strong screen presence that they made it more and more about him, and it made it more of an ensemble thing rather than just about, the Rob Lowe character, which was quite an interesting turn, actually, which you'd obviously seen that the speechwriter was quite an important part of. He was a strategist more than a speechwriter. I suppose, in this film. So he was a very important character, and he wanted to develop that and make that more the centre of it. So that's why I think they got something like Michael J. Fox in that role in the first place. They wanted somebody who had a bit of a screen presence and could carry it off because of the impassioned nature of the way that he can come across and all that as well. So yes, I thought it was good. When it had the political moments, it was very fast. There was a kinetic energy to it, and that did kind of go a wee bit when it was, we'll go to Camp David for the weekend, that kind of stuff, that.
Yeah, it was a bit soft-focused, twinkly-eyed kind of thing.
Yeah, but it needed that, because then that was building up the whole point that he wasn't reacting to the character attacks on him by Bob Rumsden, played by Richard Dreyfuss. And Richard Dreyfuss is really good, and again, a very small role. He's maybe on screen for, 10, 15 minutes. I think there's only one scene where he's in the same room as the president, because the rest of the time he's talking to his pals, and he's on like TV interview or whatever.
And a lot of it for him seems to be sort of reaction shots. Like we see something happening with the Andrew Shepherd character, and then you get like a really nice close up on his face, and he's obviously like scheming or furious or something. So there's a lot of reacting but not a lot of acting, if that makes sense, in his role. But I did listen, it was the 90s, right? There was obviously a lot of sleaze around, but I did wonder why they were sort of going down the route of like, the press were, when they were sort of committing to like TV debates, the press were asking him like basically if he was shagging somebody, as opposed to, what do you think of, there's been a bombing in Libya, how are you going to support troops on the ground there, that sort of thing. So part of me is almost like, I wish they sort of leaned into the sleazy elements a little bit more, because that would have been a bit more interesting, like sort of president caught up in a sort of personal scandal, which meant his focus was detracted from the job that he should be doing, but that never quite materialised either. And I do wonder, did that end up on the cutting room floor, now that you're saying that the original script was so long? Because surely Richard Dreyfuss's character would have really sort of gone after them. And as I say, in that scene where they're all sitting in the high back leather chairs smoking cigars, that is their plan, is, now that he's dating someone, like it's like a free-for-all, they can go for him. And I did quite enjoy that wee scene because I was like, yes, that's like proper mustache-twirling villains like you've got going on there. But that just never really materialised into something, and I was kind of wishing that it had.
Yeah, like the whole sort of backroom deals thing,
Yeah,
smoky rooms and all. Yeah, that worked particularly well, and the fact that they were all they were almost like rubbing their hands and saying,
yeah,
now he has a girlfriend.
it really was like that. They all had like 1920s radio voices. It was exactly like
Yeah, you could tell very much that they were the bad guys because they were always wearing like dark clothing and all that. And, like you say, it was all very sort of Machiavellian plots and all this sort of stuff as well. So, oh man, right. So, the film itself, the look of it, the direction. What did you think, Jay? Was it obviously Rob Reiner's a top-notch director? So,
oh, gorgeous to look at. Like I really appreciate something that can take a setting like that, the White House, the most famous address in the world, and actually put you right in the heart of it. And I definitely felt that the direction helped with that because the camera was really fluid. You were again, that whole walking down corridors talking thing. I really like that sort of directorial style. And then you were getting like lovely overhead shots in the Oval Office, so you get to see the grandeur of the big crest in the middle of the room. And I feel like it's a film where you really got a sense of like the weight of the furniture and the lighting that comes in the room at night time when they're all sort of huddled over their desks, and you got the sense of the sort of historical importance of the location. So I really appreciated that elements of it. As I say, less keen on the sort of twinkly-eyed, soft-focused close-ups when Michael Douglas is about to make a move. But I definitely think that the direction really puts you in the heart of the action, particularly in those political scenes, where, as you say, there's a real sort of kinetic energy about them, and it needed that sort of fast-paced sort of direction and editing to go with it. And I think it definitely does the job in that sense.
Yeah, it was a nice film to look at. I think it's obviously the very sort of high production values, and Rob Reiner knows his way around a film set quite obviously. So yes, it had this sort of gloss to it. It's a nice sheen and everything. It looked very good. There was some interesting stuff that came out from it in terms of the sets themselves. The Oval Office set was originally constructed for the film Dave, which had come out a year or two before, the Kevin Kline, Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, right, okay.
Comedy film, the one where he is not the president, but he pretends to be the president. But apparently the set was used again for both The West Wing and for Nixon, the Nixon biography.
Oh,
so it's been a couple of times it's been used and reused, which is quite interesting because you tend to find that these things are always kind of slightly different. But there's a real sort of through line with that because they thought it looked so good as well, which I kind of that's quite kind of nice in its own. So let me see. Obviously, we talked about the music. The music is very lush, more than anything else. It's sweeping strings and everything. So I can see why that can get a person annoyed a little about it. But it's one of these. It's like you say, the film is trying to be presidential.
Yeah.
So the music was trying to be presidential as well. Or did you think it just was a wee bit too much?
I find it a bit hyperbolic. I imagine if you're American watching this, you would want to put your hand on your heart and like stand up and salute or something. I don't know. But for me, it was just really over the top. I think because it almost felt like a sort of like a 1940s melodrama style of music when they had like women's pictures in inverted commas. It felt like that, very sort of not pompous, I don't know what the word is. There's a lot of like, as you say, searing strings and all that sort of thing. And for me, as I say in my notes, one of the first thing I wrote was it reminds me of Disney and the Hall of Presidents. So it did feel a bit kind of corny at times. So it matches the sort of romantic part of the film, but it maybe doesn't match the sort of more serious political drama. But again, I think that just comes down to the overall issue that I had with this film, is that I didn't know what it wanted to be sort of tonally, and that style of music maybe only fits with about 50% of the storyline.
Yeah. So I'm going to go into sort of spoiler territory a little here just for the last wee bit of this. The film in itself is obviously leading up to, you can tell just from the description of it's leading up to a conclusion. There are two things on the go. There is the energy bill, the gun bill, and there is also the character attacks on the president, which leads to 2 speeches towards the end of the film. One comes from Lewis, played by Michael J. Fox, where he passionately, I would say, lays out what's wrong with Andrew Shepard's approach to the fact that he won't react, he won't engage in a debate. And the second one is where Andrew Shepard, played by Michael Douglas, actually does react. What did you think of those in terms of the writing, the sort of the power of these scenes, and crucially, do you think they worked?
Yeah, no, for me, this was like the strongest part of the film. I actually thought it was really ballsy that a film was talking about gun crime and how the president doesn't do enough to act. You know, Michael J. Fox basically says that you have the choice, you can step in, you know, do it. And I thought that was really ballsy to be talking about that, you know, back in 1995. It's a conversation we're still having just now, unfortunately. So that to me really stood out as, and even the climate change, the fossil fuel bill, again, to be talking about that back in 1995, I was like, wow, these are things that we're still debating, we're still arguing about, we're still not doing anything about. So for me, this is when Michael J. Fox sort of really came into his own in this film, because up until that point, he'd been seen as the sort of like constantly on the verge of a heart attack, constantly scrambling through papers, like throwing things at the president, you know, asking him to do things. And it was all very like he was running on, you know, caffeine or God knows what else. Whereas in this moment, he didn't slow down necessarily because his speech is very impassioned, but you actually got a sense of why he was in that job and what he wanted to achieve as a character. So I thought that was flawless. And then when Andrew Shepard finally sort of steps up to make his speech, you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's more to you than just trying to get your hole. Like, you actually care about the job that you're in, and you do really want to get these various bills passed through Congress or whatever it is. So yeah, I thought that, to me, they were the 2 sort of standout moments of the film, because you actually got a sense of character that I felt you were really lacking up until that point. And as I say, ballsy to be talking about those 2 things, I think, back in the mid-90s.
Definitely, yeah. It was sort of nicely placed, these 2 speeches. They were quite close together. Obviously, there was the first speech, and then the president had to go and reflect on what he was going to do. Montage of him walking about at night.
Love it.
In the West Wing, you know, this kind of thing. And walking up and down the stairs where all the presidential portraits are. The JFK one was quite prominent. The one of him with his head sort of bowed. So yeah, it was obviously deep in thought. And then he comes up and gives this big speech. I think that is one of the reasons why so many people like this film. It's not for the romantic story. It's the fact that there is this 3-minute speech delivered by Michael Douglas where he starts off sort of quite forcefully, and then he drops it down just a wee bit when he starts talking about Sidney Ellen Wade and how, you know, she's basically out of your league, Bob, and all this sort of stuff. You know, when he recites about what Bob Rumsden has actually said about and all that, and then it just totally changes. It's almost like a flip, and he becomes powerful. He becomes a statesman-like figure, and he sort of lays out exactly what they're going to do. And obviously there's a sort of the killer end line, which is based on Bob Rumsden always going, you know, I'm Bob Rumsden and I'm running for the president. I'm running for president, and he sort of flips that again. So I thought, yeah, that was such a strong piece of writing and such a strong piece of acting, because for the whole of that speech, the camera was directly on him. It didn't really, I think it may have cut away maybe once or twice for sort of reaction shots within the press room, but the majority of it was on him, straight on, focus. So it was totally focused on, you know, you could, there was nowhere else for it to look. There was no distractions. You were just focused on what you were saying. And the sort of the strength of that came across. I thought, yeah, that's excellent. Really, really good writing, you know, and really, really good performance as well. So I kind of suspect that's why it is regarded as still being, you know, it's the same as anything. If it's got a good ending, you kind of forgive the 40 minutes of rubbish that you've watched beforehand.
Yeah, no, I get that sort of notion of, particularly in films, I think presidents are often portrayed as kind of not superheroes, but that was definitely his sort of like superhero moment, as it were. He was there to stand up for, you know, what he thought was right, not just on a personal level, but for his party and for the people. And so it was a real sort of like 2 fingers up to Richard Dreyfuss's character, so he could sort of skulk back into the shadows or whatever. So I do think that cinema-going audiences in particular like their presidents or prime ministers or whatever the leader happens to be to have these kind of superhero moments, and that was definitely his.
Yeah, I think that especially if you look at the number of films that have had presidents who are black or female or non sort of white middle-aged man, sort of basically what we have, or sorry, it's more geriatric man for the last sort of 10 years. So even back then, I mean, when you look at it, he's like the idealized version of a democratic leader, whereas Bill Clinton, who even from the start was a bit sort of slippery and everything, and obviously that was borne out with some of the stuff he was involved in. The scandals, that's more of a scandal than anything, a single man dating a woman who's not married, that's that shouldn't really be a scandal, but whereas what he was actually doing in real life obviously was. So it was. I thought that the speeches were very good. Obviously a lot of people have thought the same as well, because it has been plagiarized a number of times by real life politicians. There's an Australian politician that used it. I think Mark Rubio used part of it as well. It might not have been Rubio, it was one of them. They've actually used elements of the speech as well, which is quite funny, about the character debate. It was during the Republican, so the run up to the Republican nomination, and I think Trump was having a go at somebody's wife, and the guy said, "No, she's out of your league. If you want to have a character debate, you have to come to me because she's so far out of your league and all this." And obviously Trump wouldn't have got that reference at all. But
no.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose it's better than quoting the speeches of Hitler or Goebbels, which is where the Republicans are going at the moment,
Oh, yeah. What was that film that I recommended to you, the one about the campaign managers? It was Billy Bob Thornton and...
Oh, Sandra Bullock, I can't remember what that was called. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And that's the one where they quote the Hitler's speech.
Oh, my God. I mean, I think quoting Michael Douglas is forgivable. Quoting, obviously, the Nazi Party, not so much. So, they can have the Andrew Shepard speech.
Yeah, good. So, recommend or not recommend?
I'm going to say no on this one, just because it's not... I feel like if you're going to go and watch a good political drama, just go and watch some of Sorkin's other work. Most notably, obviously, The West Wing. This just, for me, the two leads didn't work, and I'd much rather have sort of had a more sort of complex understanding of how votes are sort of won and how the system works. The romantic thing just really, really fell down for me, I'm afraid. So it's a no on this one.
Yep. I would say it would be a sort of yes for me, based on the fact that it's an interesting thing to look at before you actually go and watch The West Wing, or if you've seen The West Wing but you haven't seen this, it's interesting to see where a lot of the ideas came from for both the characterization and the style of the drama as well. Yes, the romantic stuff is a wee bit icky, but we're going to get slightly ickier in a little while. But yes, I would recommend it, just if you can get past some of the more awkward romantic stuff in it, then yes, give it a watch. It's a very good Michael Douglas performance in the political side of it as well. So yeah. So that's the first of our two films, and now we shall move on to the second comedy. Again, alongside The American President, it was rather a large hit film this in the year 1995 as well, which is not something you can really say these days. You don't get a lot of big family grossing comedies, if you like. But anyway, we are now going to be discussing While You Were Sleeping.
For Lucy, loneliness was a way of life.
Joe Jr.'s still single.
Yeah, it's a shocker.
But the moment she saw Peter, she became a believer in love at first sight.
He was perfect.
Then fate stepped in.
There's a train coming!
Oh, God, you smell good.
Now she's part of his life.
He's in a coma.
Oh, I was gonna marry him.
Who's she?
She's his fiance. No. Peter's engaged.
She saved his life.
Part of his family.
Hey, sis, where's my, Lucy's going to marry my brother Peter. Peter.
What? I didn't mean for this to happen. I don't know what to do.
Don't tell them a thing. Well, since they met you, they figure they have Peter back. They need you, Lucy. Just like you need them.
Come on, everybody. And the grandmother, she's got this heart thing.
She had 3 attacks already.
Now you tell them now, and you might as well shoot Grandma.
This is a comedy set during the holiday period, during the Christmas period, although it's never really regarded as being a Christmas film when you see the lists at all, which is kind of strange. You know, it's just one of these films. I think it's just set at Christmas more than anything else. But there's a Christmas tree in it. There's baubles. There's exchanging of gifts. Yep. The film stars Sandra Bullock as Lucy. She works for the Chicago Transit Authority. She is working in a booth at a train station. She sells tickets, tokens. She gives out the tokens. And she meets, or she keeps seeing this guy, Peter, who's played by Peter Gallagher. And she basically has fallen for him, if you like. She wants to get to know him a little better, shall we say. And due to a happy coincidence, Peter gets mugged while on the station platform, falls onto the train line and injures himself. She jumps on, helps get him off the train line, and is there when he gets taken into the hospital. And there's a bit of a misunderstanding where the nurse thinks that she is actually Peter's fiancée. So therefore she's family, so she can get in to see him. And she's in sitting beside him. Peter at this point is in a coma from his injuries. And guess what? His family turns up and they don't know anything about what's going on in terms of who she is and everything. And again, it's another misunderstanding. Instead of just walking away, she kind of plays along with it because she's infatuated with Peter. And the family kind of play along with it as well. They kind of go, oh, we didn't know this. And the whole reasoning behind that is Peter was not estranged from his family, but he's living his own life outside of the sort of the family home. So they didn't really know what was going on with him. So that's the kind of setup, and comedy ensues from there. So Miss Mary, another comedy, 1995, romance in it. This time, female lead rather than a male lead. What did you think of this? What were your expectations as well?
This film, I've never seen it before, and I love it, and I'm now adding it to my Christmas watch list every year. See, as soon as it started off, and it starts off with that song, "This Will Be an Everlasting Love," I was like, I already love this film. Then there's a cat, then there's a voiceover, and you get to grips with Sandra Bullock's character, Sandra Bullock, who I love anyway. Then the title cards go up and I see Peter Boyle and Glynis John. Sold! Yeah, absolutely, from start to finish. Loved this film. This is exactly my type of romantic comedy because the female lead is actually fleshed out. She is a tangible person. There's a mix-up. I love a mix-up in a romantic comedy. And the family, like the actual family, are bonkers. Like all of them 2-1, mental. And of course, you've got Bill Pullman. Gorgeous Bill Pullman. I mean, imagine being in a position where you have a choice between Peter Gallagher and Bill Pullman. That's like all your Christmases come at once. It really is. So loved it. So buzzing to talk about this. This is exactly my type of film.
Yeah, I kind of thought it might be, to be perfectly honest. I could hardly remember this film. I know I'd made up the lists of these ones, but I'd made up the list purely on trying to get pairings that kind of worked within films that were popular within it. So I remembered nothing about this film. And as soon as it started, I kind of thought, yeah, I kind of like this. It's very reminiscent of sort of Nora Ephron type.
That's exactly that kind of vibe, yeah.
And like I say, it starts right away with the music and the setup and all that. In the first 10 minutes, you know exactly what type of person Lucy is, how she lives her life. Even there's a lot of sort of visual indicators as well. She always wears sort of outsized clothing and all that, and that comes back because obviously that's got to do with the fact that her father had recently passed away. But that's not, in some films, that would have been brought up right away. The fact that, you know, why she's doing that, and they kind of rush to tell you what's actually going on, but they didn't in this one. It kind of, it took its time, it didn't rush at things at all. The whole point of it, I mean, that's a thing of sort of TV shows and films as well. See if somebody actually just talked to somebody else, it would be over in about 5 minutes.
I know. But then we wouldn't have the fun.
But then again, you wouldn't have a drama or a comedy or anything like that because there's no sort of misunderstanding about it. Yeah, I do like Sandra Bullock. I think she's a very good actor. And at that point, she was really sort of on the up. It was just after Speed, she was getting these roles in both drama and action films. And she was, that's like the thing I was talking about earlier with Annette Bening being that sort of level below.
Yeah.
Sandra Bullock's at the top line here. She is kind of carrying this film. Would you agree with that? Would you say that she did carry this film?
Oh, absolutely. I think her performance is great in this, but then I struggle to find a bad Sandra Bullock performance. She is relatable in a way that's not that typical 90s klutzy romantic leads. Like, there is obviously the mix-up where they assume she's Peter's fiancé, but she has a tangible job that she obviously hates, which is fine. That's, we daydream with her in the booth, and that's fine. She has an apartment that is being run by these two really sleazy Italians. And Joe Jr., the handyman, is like determined to ask it out. And as a woman, you're watching that go and think of all the different ways you can say no to him. Yes, she has a cat, but she's not like a lonely cat lady. Like, she's someone who at this particular point in her life when we meet her is a bit lost because obviously her father has passed away. She's living by herself. She's in a job that she doesn't particularly enjoy. And the daydreams and the escapism are just totally relatable. I think that she's a really well fleshed out character. And the more her sort of character develops alongside the Callahan family and we actually get to know her and sort of pick apart the bones of it a bit more, I just think it's a really great performance. And she is so endlessly watchable anyway. So, I think she's great in this.
Yeah, I think she does carry this film quite easily because a lot of it is on her shoulders. A lot of the screen time is her rather than anybody else. There's a few, maybe only about 5-10% of the film is without her sort of front and centre. And her screen presence is incredible. I really like her as an actor as well. And I think she does a particularly good job here because comedy can sometimes be quite difficult to sort of carry off. And she doesn't seem to force it. It's quite gentle, her approach to this particular character, in that she's kind of got into the essence of it, and she doesn't have to be totally upfront about everything she does and all that. So it's very sort of subtle the way that she kind of does it. And I thought, yeah, it's particularly nice. So you mentioned Bill Pullman there. Now, him in a romantic comedy for me is a bit strange because I associate him with more sort of serious drama and sometimes a bit of action and all that. So seeing him in a romantic, not lead a romantic support, because that would take away from the fact that Sandra Bullock is the lead here. It's not a co-lead, if you like. Yeah. What do you think? Good?
So handsome, so charismatic. And that kind of character that I really like in a sort of mid-90s comedy where they don't necessarily like each other to start off with, but you're going to have that beautiful enemies to lovers arc that makes these sort of films work. But I think that he was really interesting because she obviously had this fantasy about Peter, who is his brother. And the more you see of Peter through his family, or when you get to see inside of his apartment, you think, maybe he's not that nice a guy. Yeah. But Jack is someone who actually is interested in her. He asks her questions. He takes her out to nice places. You can tell that he knows that something isn't quite right because obviously he tries to do a little bit of snooping of his own. But their chemistry is just so effortless and it's so instant. And you can just tell the minute that they lock eyes on each other when he's sitting on the steps and she's trying to sneak out the family home. You're like, I just want the two of you to kiss right now.
Yeah, again, as I said, he's usually associated more with sort of heavier drama roles, but yeah, he carries off very well here. It's the lightness of touch. It doesn't try to force it. It doesn't try to come across as being like too schmaltzy or anything like that. It just basically follows Sandra Bullock's lead in this. It reacts very well to what she's doing and sort of counters it. There's, like I say, there's this slight of air of disbelief because he knows something's not quite there. It's not all it seems to be, because he knows what his brother's like more than anything else. It's not so much he thinks she's trying to deceive them, but there is a wee element of that. But obviously, she isn't trying to deceive them for like any sort of financial gain, because they don't have an awful lot or anything, so it's not the same. So it was interesting in that. It must have been a bit of a thankless role for Peter Gallagher, because he's lying in bed for months.
Yeah. Although I do wonder, as an actor, is that the dream job? Like, quite high billing. You know, he was a heartthrob, mid-90s, and you just get to lie asleep for. Although I did like, obviously, there's a few scenes where, like, they talk about the fact that he's like missing a testicle and stuff like that. So probably a bit of humiliation there as well.
I thought that was a nice wee touch, because obviously they were talking about sort of personal things, and she was able to do that from a conversation that she'd heard earlier. And I thought, that's really, it was very cleverly done, because that's how these comedies are actually built. It's all on something happening and there's a payoff, same as, you know, like Chekhov's gun kind of idea, but in this case it's Chekhov's testicle. The testicle is discussed in the first act. It will make an appearance later on. Yeah. A bit like sort of working in the White House, I would imagine, as well, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I like that, and I like the fact with the Peter character, when he woke up, he kind of thought, oh, the gig's up here, he's going to say he doesn't know who he is. But he was convinced that he had temporary amnesia, and he couldn't remember anything from the last couple of months, so that the deception could continue. I just thought that was perfect, because the film could have come off the rails a wee bit at that point, and it would have got more serious and everything. But no, it kept it going quite nicely, and I thought that works really well. That is actually really, really nice. So you've talked a wee bit about the sort of main support, but I mean, you've got Glynis John, you've got Peter Boyle, and in a very good performance, you've got Jack Warden as Saul, the Jewish friend that had to pretend to be Catholic for a first communion or something. Oh no, because he became the godfather as well. Oh man, that was really good. Now, these are all, at this point in their career, they're seasoned and professional actors with heads of experience behind them. I kind of think they brought all of that to the screen on this film.
Oh, and then, so I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I will talk about the others, but just a moment for Glynis Jones in this, because I'm obviously Mary Poppins obsessed, and to see her name pop up in the credits, I was absolutely buzzing. But then to realise that she was playing the sort of batty, outspoken auntie, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So there's a gorgeous scene where, I mean, she's always just saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, but they're in church, obviously, for Christmas, and she's sitting there talking about the person who's given the reading, and she says things like, how does he get to be a lector when he takes marijuana really loud in an echoey church? And she's just always putting her foot in it. And it's a wee, I feel like in anyone else's hands, it could have been proper chewing the scenery stuff, but she just does that sort of dotty old auntie thing so perfectly, you know, still with that sort of clipped accent as well. And I absolutely loved it. And then you've got Peter Boyle, who's playing the sort of family patriarch, who immediately when he comes in, because he's quite gruff, you think, oh, she's going to get found out here. But he just totally embraces Lucy, and he wants her to be part of their family Christmas. And he's really like warm, and he talks about, you know, the family furniture business and how much it means to him. And I just thought that was like a really nice, soft character. I mean, I only really know him from primarily know him from like Everybody Loves Raymond, where he's obviously just doing out and out comedy, whereas here he was just kind of soft and really fatherly and just full of love. And Jack Warden's character, obviously, I mean, he sort of gives Lucy the jump, as it were. He knows what's going on, but he decides to sort of play along with it as well. I just thought there were so many like really beautiful like character performances. And it's interesting because I think it was you and I were talking about how you don't really get character actors anymore, but I feel like this is a film that's really full of them, and it works so well because, you know, Sandra Bullock and Bill Pullman's characters find themselves in funny situations, but as you said, they're not pushing it, they're not trying to be funny, whereas all of these other sort of supporting cast, they bring out and out comedy, like with their dialogue or their reactions or whatever, and it just works so well, and it gives this incredible lightness to the film that I just think you wouldn't get if it was maybe different types of actors doing it. But as I say, because you're in the sort of safe hands of these character actors, it works so beautifully.
Yeah, there was some nice lines written for him to actually sort of accent it, like with Glynis John saying, "I don't drink anymore, but I don't drink any less."
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that could be delivered really, really badly, like I did there, but in the hands of an actor like Glynis Johns, it comes across really well because it's totally in fitting with the character that she's actually developed, and it works really well. And Jack Warden, I mean, I've seen him in so many things, and he was about for years in the late 50s, I think he was sort of about. So obviously he was like in 12 Angry Men and all sorts of things like that as well. So he's this guy who just has this magnificent screen presence. When I'm watching any scene that he's in, I'm drawn to him rather than drawn to any of the other actors, just because he's subtly basically chewing the scenery. He's larger than anybody else in the room, which is just a magnificent thing to be able to do, and to be able to have that sort of presence. It's just brilliant. Just thought it really enlivened the film, because it would have been all too easy to have this zany cast of characters and it would just feel a bit forced. But it just felt very, very natural as well. So I really like that, and the fact that he was the one that was counselling her all the time. It's always the one that he was always sitting down saying, look, you're a good kid, I'm not going to sort of spoil things for you. I'm not going to tell anybody about it. And obviously he was delighted when it flipped and she was no longer totally interested in Peter anymore. So, and that kind of worked itself out, obviously, in the end. I mean, I'm not giving anything away.
Yeah, I know. The film, yeah, I was going to say the film.
A 30-year-old romantic comedy with two people looking longingly at each other on the poster. So it's not as if you're going to be sort of caught out. In fact, the posters that I've posted up, it's actually Sandra Bullock, all dressed up nicely, wearing clothes that actually fit her, being held up by Bill Pullman on the side of a railway track.
Yeah.
So,
spoilers.
What? The whole point.
Because Bill Pullman doesn't come into it for I would say maybe the first half hour, 40 minutes or so.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. So obviously Lucy is supposed to be this very plain character. I don't know if that particularly works very well when you put Sandra Bullock in.
No, she's probably the Hollywood concept of plain, which is always an oversized sweater and leggings, which is ironically what I'm wearing today. But I've got Hollywood plain. I'm just regular Glasgow plain. So I do think I was surprised that she wasn't wearing glasses, to be honest with you, because she has her hair in a ponytail quite a lot with a scrunchie. But I get that they were sort of trying to, she's not super made up. When you see Peter's actual fiance appear, she's very sort of 90s bottle blonde, shoulder pads, big pink lipstick, the full face done. Whereas Lucy, I suppose, is seen as more natural because she's not really wearing makeup. As I say, she's in the oversized clothing for the vast majority of the film. So she's Hollywood plain, which is a different level for us mere mortals.
Yeah, it does make it a little difficult to get into the character of Lucy, I think, at the start, because she's meant to be this person who's fairly anonymous. She works, she's somebody that hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, see every day. She's meant to be this anonymous, ordinary person who can pass. Sandra Bullock.
Yeah,
it's not quite...
You would notice Sandra Bullock in a ticket booth, although there is a sort of montage where you see people throwing their tokens in and you always just see the back of their heads or their shoulders or whatever. So there is this notion that she is constantly ignored. But yeah, you're right. If Sandra Bullock was in your ticket booth, you would bloody well notice.
Yeah. So, like I say, this was a Christmas film. Do you think it works in terms of the seasonal quality of it? Does that help the story?
Do you know what? I don't think it necessarily adds anything to the story, but it does give Peter Boyle's character an incentive to invite Lucy round, because obviously it's Christmas Eve when Peter falls onto the railway track, so they were not going to have family Christmas together, and therefore that's the excuse to sort of invite her round. And then we get this gorgeous, like, I don't know where this was shot, but it did remind me of the Home Alone street. You know, it was always like beautiful red brick houses, perfectly decorated with their exterior lights. And then you walk in to the Callahan family home, and Lucy's standing there with her lovely little poinsettia, and it's dressed beautifully. Like, there's like tartans, it's reds, it's greens, it's creams and golds, and it's really, really, like, the set dressing is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm 100% adding it to my Christmas list of films that I watch, but I don't necessarily feel like that it does anything for the story other than, as I say, it gives Peter Boyle's character an excuse to sort of invite her round, like, don't spend Christmas by yourself because Peter's in hospital, come and spend it with us, sort of thing.
Yeah, because they obviously miss Christmas because they have it after Christmas, don't they? I think it's in Boxing Day or something like that. Yeah. I liked it as a framing device because, like I say, there are these elements where you can, you know, there's a family dinner and all that too. But it also sets it up as being the sort of loneliest time of the year and everything as well. She's in an apartment on her own, all that kind of. And I think it only sort of covers, only spans about a week or so, doesn't it? Finish sort of around about New Year. So it's a nice sort of tight time frame for it, because then obviously Peter wakes up from a coma relatively quickly. It's only a couple of days he's out. It's not months or anything, which sort of ingrain her more to the family and make it more difficult in terms of our romantic relationships and how it all kind of works out. But yeah, I liked the idea of it being like that. I thought that worked reasonably well. Now, originally with this film, when we're talking about the story originally was going to be a man working in the transit authority, and a woman falls onto the tracks and he pretends to be her fiancé. And that was deemed to be, even by 1995 standards, just a bit too creepy and stalkery. What did you think of that?
Oh, I didn't realise that. Yeah, no, I mean, I can absolutely see that. I'm not saying that gender flip in this story makes it any less weird that she pretends to be someone's fiancé that she doesn't know, but I can absolutely see the optics of that when flipped the other way would not work at all. Like, there would be something very predatory about a woman lying comatose and a man laying claim to her that for some reason doesn't feel as predatory the other way around.
Yeah. I've got to wonder what the equivalent of the single testicle would have been in that version.
And also, would it have been, like, I'm intrigued to know about this now, because would that have been the same cast? Or would that have been a completely different? Because again, if you were going to go down that route where it was the women in the coma, the casting of that and who were sort of playing the love interest would have been very, very important as well.
Oh, definitely, yes. There was all sorts of people up for the role of Jack, for instance. Dennis Quaid was considered at one
he's
point.
of a Bill Pullman type. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, but Pierce Brosnan was also considered for it as well, which I thought was a bit of a stretch. And Matthew McConaughey actually auditioned for it, but didn't get it because they didn't like his accent. So
I mean, he's an actor, so
it was very early.
Yeah,
it was very early in his career, so it's just.
I see Pierce Brosnan as more of the Peter character, because like, when you see glimpses of Peter, like, that man has an alarming number of portraits of himself sort of in his wallet and around his apartment, and there's obviously a sort of air of vanity and success and high-flying lawyer there. So I see Pierce Brosnan more as that character than the sort of homespun Jack who likes renovating tables and furniture.
So obviously Lucy is this character who basically had nothing going for her, and like, she was the one that always did the extra shifts and all this sort of stuff, and she's got this weird relationship with her boss as well, who it's just weird. What did you think of that? It was quite a small part in the film, but what did you think? Was that something that kind of sort of stood out for you?
Yeah, no, I loved that setup. As I say, Joe Jr., who is played by Michael Rispoli, and he's a sort of handyman around the building, but his dad is constantly trying to set him and Lucy up, and he's always like standing, like, scratching his arse in a pair of loose-fitting, like, tracky bottoms and a vest. And when Bill Pullman's character like shows up and he's like, yeah, I'm dating her, and you're just like, no, absolutely not. So I really like that setup, because again, it added another layer to the character, right? She was obviously this woman living by herself who, I'm not saying she was being harassed by the sort of building caretaker at all, not by any means, but obviously his son was sort of sniffing around, and it did just give you that other sort of layer of credibility to, yes, that's a very, female experience that happens. Everyone's been there. And yeah, that was a bit more sort of, again, that sort of character actor style, sort of lighter comedy. That's obviously what that was bringing to. I mean, she does lock him in her cupboard at various points and finds him with a pair of her pants. But so that was a wee bit odd and a wee bit creepy. But again, it's there to sort of bring the humor. And again, this notion of like, yes, she's supposed to be plain, but she's obviously clearly out of, Joe Jr.'s league.
Yeah, I liked the Joe Jr. character because he was pretty upfront about everything. He would try to impress her by saying, like, I know karate and things like this. And then there was the sort of switch around. Like, these are the kind of guys that seem to be around when it's like people on their own, and especially in films and stuff, on their own, they're kind of lonely and they're not vulnerable, but they seem to be more available to these sort of loner type guys. Now, I thought that the Joe Jr. character was good because he came across like that, but then, like you say, when she stuck him away in the closet, and you're thinking, okay, right? And he comes back out and he's talking about her shoes, like trying on her shoes and everything. You think that's a really nice wee twist to that, because that could have been very sort of one-dimensional, that character, but the fact that they added that wee bit of colour into him, they've made him slightly less than his macho Italian persona and everything. And I thought, that was really, really good. So yeah, I was impressed with that. But that kind of ran through the whole film in terms of the supporting characters and the way they went on. What do you think of the pacing of it, though? Do you think it rolled along quite nicely?
Yeah, I definitely think it's got a clear structure. You have her life sort of Peter's act, then you have the classic mix up and all that ensues from there, and then you have your kind of final third act. I think it moves along really, really nicely. Like, I thought it flew in as a film, largely because there are like so many like comedic beats to it, as well as obviously the romance, and because you are willing Lucy and Jack to get together. It's not that you're wishing the time away, but you are just like, oh my god, just kiss, or they're ice skating together, or they're walking along at night and you're just like, just grab her and kiss her, and you are kind of wanting it to get to that point. But I think pacing wise, clear structure. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's formulaic, but you kind of know how these sort of romantic comedies are going to go, like in terms of, as I say, the classic mishap kind of structure. But I think it flows in really, really nicely. I'd happily watch it again. Yeah,
there's not a lot of surprises to it, but that's not a bad thing, to be perfectly honest.
It feels like a comfort watch already.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And that's not a bad thing. It really isn't. If a film is done well, if it's created and there's a certain amount of heart in it, then you can just roll with it. You just enjoy it. You just get on with it. You don't necessarily need to pick it apart. It seems to be that if the film is not so good, then you get frustrated a wee bit more, and then you do start to say, well, that's not very good and that's not very good. But you can kind of forgive things a little with this one as well, I think, just in terms of the fact that it's enjoyable. It's a nice film. There was some recurring elements in the film as well. There was a lot of stuff to do with falling, which was happening in the background. One of the extra characters, who was a paper boy on a bike, fell off his bike, which wasn't actually scripted. That just happened. That was an accident, and the kid broke his arm, or broke his wrist.
That looked like a bad fall. Jeez,
Yeah, but because it was unexpected and because it kind of fitted in with the whole sort of falling aspect, falling onto train line, the Christmas tree falling out the window, that kind of idea, and then like the nurse fainting and falling on the floor and all this sort of stuff. There's a few examples of it. I think there's a nice skater falls over as well during sort of the opening bits of it as well. So, but these kind of things are very sort of subtle I take it, did you pick up on these while you were watching it and go, was that your Leo moment when you were going,
Oh, no, definitely not. Now, but the Paperboy I specifically remember, because I remember thinking, that looks like a bad fall. Like, I wonder if that was a stuntman, and now that I know that it's not, dear God, that poor boy. But of course, yes, I mean, the big thing is quite literally Peter falls on the tracks. I mean, of course, Lucy and Jack fall in love, but I never really put the dots together like that. But that's a very subtle sort of, because it's not like the nurse fainting seems natural. The Paperboy, obviously, it's slippery because it's snowy, so that feels natural as well. Obviously, Peter is mugged, so it's not a look at this, we're doing a motif. Do you know what I mean? It's a very, very subtle way of doing it, which in a film that's not particularly subtle, like that's an enjoyable wee nugget. Yeah.
Layers. It's like an onion. It's got layers. Yeah. Is there anything that I have missed in terms of covering this film? Is there anything else you want to?
Just want to add in that Jack Warden also has the line of the century at the dinner party where he says, Argentina has great beef and Nazis. And I just think that's absolutely hysterical, because Sammy and I always send each other memes about people who live in Argentina and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, what did your granddad do after, between 1939 and 1945? So we always send each other memes, and I thought he would really appreciate that line. So yeah, it was hysterical. But I just think, honestly, having just watched this for the first time, it already feels like a warm, cozy blanket, and I'm 100% adding it to my Christmas watch. It took me by surprise how much I loved it.
Cool. So that's a recommendation then.
Definitely. It's on Disney Plus, people. If you want to see Glynis Jones as your batty auntie getting steaming at Christmas and saying inappropriate things in church, this is the film for you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a very, very good film. And it's one of these ones that's just buried away in the list on Disney films. Even when they were doing their Christmas films, it wasn't even mentioned in their list of bingeable Christmas films or whatever it was. So yeah, I would suggest seeking it out. Like I say, it's on Disney. Just give it a chance if you've never seen it before. And if you have seen it, which a number of people did because it made a massive profit, I think it was $150 million at the time it actually made, on a relatively minor budget. It's one of these mid-budget films that we talk about all the time that we don't see enough of. And when we do see them, they're usually involving people being action stars now on Netflix.
I know. Do you know, it's funny, when I was watching it, I was thinking how a film like this probably wouldn't get made now, again, because it is that very, it's not safe, but it is that sort of mid-budget bracket where, there's not a big stunt sequence or anything like that. It just feels very cozy and nice. And I just thought that's a shame, because again, I think that's why we're losing character actors, because there isn't that sort of bracket for them. Whereas if you look at Conclave, which obviously we've talked about is like a roaring success of mid-budget, there's a lot of character actors involved in that I just think that are going to disappear because these types of roles are not really available anymore. And it's a shame, because this cast is phenomenal in this. Yeah,
I just don't think it would get made because of the subject matter, because of
no, and you're absolutely right. Yeah, but I just mean this sort of
Oh yeah. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, in terms of the it's just not. This type of film wouldn't be considered for any sort of budget now, and the people that are involved in it, unless they were very passionate about it. Yeah, it would take somebody. It would take an auteur director to, maybe somebody like Pedro Almodovar to do something like this, sort of a comedy of errors again. That kind of thing. Yeah.
But he does have a film called Talk to Her, which is about two people in comas, and they're sort of. Because I did wonder if it was going to be that sort of film, but it's definitely not. If you've seen Talk to Her, this is a very, very different film.
Yes, different style, I think, in total, yeah. So yeah, I would recommend this film as well. I think it's excellent. It's very good indeed. So that's us for today. We will be continuing our movie marathon over the course of the year. We have a number of films planned for you, and I am just pulling up lists just now, just to give you a quick heads up. For some reason, there we go. So next month, we're going completely
in a bit
away next month. Next month is Braveheart and Rob Roy, which
looking
promises
forward to
to be. I have never seen Rob Roy, so I will
Me neither.
To see that one, and we've got stuff for the rest of the year as well. A mixed bunch of pretty good 1995 films. Now, I was asked yesterday if we were going to be covering the 1995 Oscar winner by my darling wife, which was Forrest Gump, but it's a 1994 film.
Oh, of course, because it'll be the Oscars the following year.
Yes. Yep. And we are covering the 1996 Oscar winner next month because Braveheart was the runaway winner then.
Yep.
So we will be covering that. But I mean, having said that, American President was up for an Oscar, and I think 12 Monkeys were up for a couple of Oscars as well.
I'm sorry, what the fuck was the American
I think it was
up for an Oscar for?
The music, of all things.
Oh my God. Okay. The Oscars have
memorable. It's obviously memorable. So there you go. You know?
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
But yeah. If you actually look at the Oscar nominations for the various years, there are all sorts of weird and wonderful films, and they get one nomination in like best hair or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's a film you would never think would get anywhere near the
But
Oscars.
they get to put it in a poster, Oscar nominated, and then the category's just really small, so you can't read what one.
Oh man. Right, so that is us for another day. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can find us on all the social media channels. We are particularly active on Blue Sky. Not so much. Well, we're still active on X as well, but really that's just a cesspit at the moment. So there's not much going there unless you are part of a particular interest group, shall we say. But yes, hit us up at all these platforms. You can find us. Just search for Moviescramble. If you want to send us an email, it's Moviescramble. podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. And yeah, let us know what you think. If you've got any ideas for what you think we may want to cover over the next week, well, just drop us a line, send us a message. We do regularly check them, so we will get back to you. And obviously, if you want to give us a wee review as well on the podcast app of choice, we would be very grateful for that. The more reviews, positive ones, obviously.
I was going to say 5-star only, yeah.
Yeah, it all helps with the mechanics of getting us out there as well. So please take a minute and say that we're really good at what we do. It's an ego thing as well. Don't worry about it. So that's us for today. We shall be back relatively soon, and we shall see you then. Cheerio.
Bye.